Welcome to Lucian's Vault. I am Lucian, the keeper of history. Today, our topic is the land of the free, but also a land of conflict, America. Let's begin. Let's start with the war that gave birth to the United States, the American Revolution. What began as a protest against British taxation soon turned into a full-scale war for independence. The first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord in 1775. Soon, George Washington led the Continental Army against Britain's overwhelming forces. The war raged on for years, with turning points like the Battle of Saratoga and the brutal winter at Valley Forge. Victory came in 1781 at Yorktown, forcing Britain's surrender. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized the United States. The war was over, but America's conflicts were only beginning. After securing independence, the United States faced another war against Britain. Trade disputes, British interference, and tensions with Native American tribes led to the War of 1812. In 1814, British forces stormed Washington, D.C., setting the White House ablaze. But America fought back. The Battle of Baltimore inspired the Star-Spangled Banner, and in New Orleans, Andrew Jackson led the U.S. to victory. Though the Treaty of Ghent ended the war, it proved that the United States would stand its ground against the world's greatest empire. A war of ambition and expansion. In 1846, the United States clashed with Mexico over disputed lands. President Polk, driven by manifest destiny, sought to extend America's borders westward. The war was swift and decisive. American forces marched deep into Mexico, capturing Mexico City itself. By 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, granting the U.S. vast new territories, including California and Texas. A victory, but one that deepened tensions within America, pushing it ever closer to civil war. A war that tore a nation apart. In 1861, the United States split in two, North against South, Union against Confederacy. At stake, the fate of slavery and the very survival of the Union. Early victories favored the South, but with the Emancipation Proclamation, the war became a fight for freedom. The turning point came at Gettysburg, where the Union halted the Confederate advance. By 1865, the war ended. Lincoln declared victory, but paid the ultimate price. America was reunited, but at a terrible cost. A struggle that lasted centuries. From the first European settlers to the dawn of the 20th century, Native American tribes fought to defend their lands, culture, and way of life. As the United States expanded westward, conflict was inevitable. From the Trail of Tears to the Great Sioux War, indigenous resistance was met with brutal military campaigns. By 1924, the battles had ended. The tribes survived, but their world had been forever changed. 1898, a year that marked the end of one empire and the rise of another. Tensions between Spain and the United States had been brewing for years, fueled by Cuban independence movements and American ambitions. When the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, war was inevitable. In just 4 months, Spain lost its last major colonies: Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. The United States emerged as a global power, forever changing the balance of world politics. For nearly 3 years, the United States watched from afar as Europe burned in the fires of war. But by 1917, German U-boats had sunk American ships, and the infamous Zimmermann telegram revealed Germany's plans to ally with Mexico against the U.S. That was the breaking point. In April, the United States declared war. American soldiers, doughboys, landed in France, pushing back the German advance. By November 1918, the war was over. The world had changed forever, and the U.S. had claimed its place as a global superpower. For 2 years, the world was at war, but the United States remained on the sidelines. That changed on December 7, 1941. Japan launched a devastating surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The next day, the U.S. declared war. From the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, American forces fought across the globe. The war ended in 1945 with the fall of Nazi Germany and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States emerged as a global superpower, entering an era of new conflicts. The Cold War had begun. After World War II, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel. The North, backed by the Soviet Union and China, wanted to unite the peninsula under communism. The South, supported by the United States, resisted. In 1950, North Korean forces stormed across the border, nearly conquering the South. The U.S. and United Nations intervened, pushing the invaders back. Then China entered the war, forcing a bloody stalemate. 3 years of brutal combat left millions dead, but the borders remained unchanged. To this day, the Korean peninsula remains divided, a lasting symbol of Cold War tensions. A war fought not just in the jungles of Vietnam, but in the hearts and minds of the American people. The U.S. entered the war to stop the spread of communism, but in the dense jungles, North Vietnamese forces and the Viet Cong waged a brutal guerrilla war. Despite massive firepower, America couldn't secure victory. The conflict divided the nation, and by 1973, U.S. troops withdrew. 2 years later, Saigon fell. Vietnam was united under communism, and America was left questioning its role in the world. Wars shape nations, but history is endless. What I have shown you today is but a fragment of America's long and complex story. There are more battles, more struggles, but time does not wait. For now, this chronicle ends, yet the archive remains open, waiting to be explored. If knowledge is what you seek, return again. There is always more to uncover.